A decorated officer's defiant accusation in my courtroom didn't just challenge my authority. It resurrected a 15-year-old ghost I thought I'd buried forever. The weight of the robe is something you never quite get used to. It's not the physical heaviness of the fabric, but the symbolic weight of the lives that pass through your courtroom. Every day I sit on this bench, a raised platform of worn oak and justice, and I listen to the fractured stories of my city. I'm Judge Alana Hayes, and for the past 5 years, this courtroom has been my world. Before that, I spent 15 years as a prosecutor, so I've seen the justice system from both sides. I know its strengths, and I know, intimately, where the rot sets in. The day it all happened started like any other Tuesday. The air in courtroom 4B was thick with the usual cocktail of cheap cologne, anxiety, and the faint, dusty smell of old paper. The docket was packed, a depressing parade of misdemeanors and low-level felonies. The case before me was a possession charge, the People vs. Jamal Evans. Mr. Evans was a 19-year-old kid with wide, terrified eyes and a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept since the Clinton administration. The arresting officer was taking the stand, Officer Frank Miller. I knew Officer Miller by reputation before I ever saw him in person. He was one of those cops who was a local hero in the papers and a recurring nightmare in the public defender's office. He had a stack of commendations as thick as a phone book and an equally thick file of informal complaints that always seemed to disappear. When he walked to the stand, he moved with the unshakable confidence of a man who believed the world owed him its respect. He was tall, barrel-chested, with a military-style haircut that was starting to gray at the temples. He settled into the witness box, adjusted the microphone, and gave the prosecutor a tight, confident nod. The assistant DA, a fresh-faced kid named Peterson, walked him through the arrest. The testimony was textbook. Annoyingly so. Miller described a high-crime area, the furtive movements of the defendant, the plain view discovery of a small baggie of narcotics after a consensual search. It was all a little too neat, a little too polished. My old prosecutor's instincts were screaming. Cops like Miller, the ones who are too good at this, they don't just find crime. Sometimes they create the narrative for it. Jamal Evans was shaking his head from the defendant's table, whispering urgently to his lawyer, who just kept patting his shoulder with a weary look. I watched Miller's face. He never once looked at the defendant. His eyes were fixed on the jury box, playing his part to perfection. He was the protector, the thin blue line. Jamal Evans was just another statistic he was cleaning off the streets. When Peterson finished, it was the public defender's turn. Mr. Davies did his best, bless his heart, but Miller was a stone wall. He had an answer for everything. Every question about protocol was met with a citation from his training manual. Every query about the defendant's rights was deflected with calm, practiced indignation. "So, Officer Miller," Davies said, shuffling his papers, "you're saying my client, who you pulled over for a broken taillight, just volunteered to let you search his entire vehicle?" "That's correct, Counselor," Miller said, a small smirk playing on his lips. He was very cooperative. I could feel the case slipping away. This kid was going to get railroaded on the word of a cop who sounded more like a press release than a witness. I leaned forward, my hands clasped on the bench. "Officer Miller," I said, my voice cutting through the room. All eyes snapped to me. Miller's head turned, and for the first time he looked directly at me. His expression shifted. The professional calm was replaced by a flicker of annoyance, of surprise. He wasn't used to judges getting involved in cross-examination. "Your Honor," he said, his tone just a little too sharp. "Let's clarify something for the court," I continued, keeping my voice even. "You stated the narcotics were in the glove compartment. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you stated that Mr. Evans was sitting in the driver's seat when you initiated the search." "Correct." "So at what point did he open the glove compartment for you? Did you ask him to?" A beat of silence. I saw it then. A tiny crack in the armor. He hadn't prepared for this. He consented to a full search of the vehicle, Your Honor. That includes all compartments." "That wasn't my question, officer," I said, my voice dropping a little lower. "My question was, who opened the glove compartment?" He shifted in his seat. The smirk was gone. "I did, Your Honor, as part of the consensual search." "I see. And your body camera was active during this entire exchange?" His jaw tightened. "My camera experienced a malfunction, Your Honor. It failed to record the initial stop. I documented it in my report." Of course it did. The classic, infuriating malfunction. I looked at Jamal Evans, who was now staring at me, a glimmer of hope in his terrified eyes. I turned my gaze back to the decorated officer in the witness box. So, we have a broken taillight, a consensual search that the defendant disputes, a convenient camera malfunction. And your word. Is that an accurate summary of the evidence, officer? Miller's face was turning a blotchy red. He looked at the prosecutor, then at the jury, as if seeking an ally. He wasn't a witness anymore. He was a cornered animal. And then he did something I have never seen in my 20 years in the legal system. He pushed his chair back slightly, stood to his full height in the witness box, and pointed a finger. Not at the defendant. At me. Your Honor, I believe you're showing a clear and demonstrable bias in this case. He boomed, his voice echoing in the stunned silence of the courtroom. Your line of questioning is hostile and inappropriate. You are clearly attempting to intimidate a sworn officer of the law and influence the jury against me. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. My bailiff took a step forward, his hand on his sidearm. Peterson, the ADA, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I banged the gavel, once, hard. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Officer Miller, you're out of order. Sit down. But he wasn't done. The arrogance, the sheer entitlement, it was blinding him. No, I will not sit down, he shouted. It's obvious to everyone in this room that you're biased. You see a young black man at that table, and you're trying to protect him from a white cop. I've seen it with you before. I am officially requesting that you recuse yourself from this case, and I will be filing a formal complaint with the Judicial Committee. My blood ran cold. He had crossed a line no one ever crosses. He hadn't just challenged my ruling. He had challenged my authority, my integrity, my very right to sit on that bench, and he'd done it by throwing my race in my face in front of my entire court. He was trying to publicly humiliate me, to strip me of my power with the ugliest accusation he could think of. The courtroom was spinning. He stood there, defiant, a smug, triumphant look on his face. He thought he had me. He thought he'd won. But as I stared into his furious, hate-filled eyes, something clicked in the back of my mind. A file. A 15-year-old file from my time as a prosecutor. A case that had been buried. A witness who had disappeared. A different name, a different uniform, but the same arrogant smirk. It was him. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Jamal Evans anymore. He thought he was putting me on trial. He had no idea I was about to become his judge, jury, and the ghost of every crime he'd ever gotten away with. And I remembered his first. The gavel felt like a toy in my hand. For a moment all I could hear was the ringing in my own ears, the thunder of my own pulse. But the chaos was real. The jury was a sea of wide eyes and open mouths. The court reporter's fingers were frozen over her keys. My bailiff, a good man named Sergeant Peters, had his hand firmly on his weapon now, his eyes locked on Miller, ready for anything. Miller stood there, chest puffed out, basking in the havoc he had created. He thought this was his moment of victory, the maverick cop putting the biased black judge in her place. He saw me as an obstacle. He didn't realize he'd just handed me the key to a locked room in my memory I hadn't entered in over a decade. The name wasn't Miller back then. It was Milkowski. Officer Frank Milkowski, a rookie with the same swagger, the same crew cut, the same dead eyes. He was a peripheral figure in a major narcotics case I was prosecuting. The case fell apart spectacularly. Our key witness, a young confidential informant named Hector Ramirez, vanished 2 days before he was scheduled to testify in the grand jury. Just gone. We found his car abandoned by the river. No body, no note. The case imploded, and a very dangerous man walked free. Milkowski was the last officer to officially have contact with Hector. He claimed he'd dropped him off at a bus station, that Hector was scared and running. His report was neat, tidy, just like his testimony today. Soon after, Officer Milkowski resigned from the force, citing personal reasons. I heard he moved out of state. I'd assumed he was just another cop who couldn't hack it, but I never forgot his face. And now here he was, Frank Miller, a decorated hero in a different city, a different uniform, but with the same rot deep inside him. My focus sharpened. The noise of the courtroom faded away. There was only him. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the rage settle into a cold, hard stone in my gut. "Sergeant Peters," I said, my voice cutting through the din like glass, "escort the jury to the jury room. We're taking a 15-minute recess." Peters nodded, relief washing over his face as he had a clear order. "This way, ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice a low rumble. The jurors filed out, craning their necks, desperate not to miss a second of the drama. "Mr. Peterson," I said, turning my gaze to the flustered assistant DA. "Mr. Davies, approach the bench." They scurried forward, their faces pale. Miller remained standing in the witness box, a smug look returning to his face. He thought I was caving, preparing to discuss his motion for recusal. He thought he was in control. "Officer Miller, you may remain where you are," I commanded. I waited until the courtroom doors closed behind the last juror, sealing the four of us in a tomb of sudden, heavy silence. "Your Honor," Peterson began, wringing his hands. "On behalf of the people, I want to apologize for the officer's outburst. It was unprofessional and—" I held up a hand, silencing him. "Your apologies are noted, Mr. Peterson, but we now have a serious accusation on the record. Officer Miller has accused the court of bias and has demanded my recusal." I looked directly at Miller, whose smirk widened. "That is a grave charge, officer. One I take very seriously. Before I can rule on such a motion, I need to ensure the record is complete, for the benefit of the Judicial Committee you're so eager to speak with." This seemed to please him. He folded his arms across his chest. "I stand by my statement, Your Honor." "I'm sure you do," I said, my voice dangerously soft. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the bench. "So let's talk about your record, the record you seem so proud of. You've been with this department for, what is it, 12 years? 13 next month," he said, puffing out his chest. "2 commendations for valor, 4 for meritorious service." "Impressive," I deadpanned. "And before that, where were you commissioned?" His eyes narrowed slightly. The question was unexpected. "I was with the Sheriff's Department in Clayton County for a year before I transferred." "And before Clayton County?" I pressed, keeping my gaze locked on his. He hesitated. "I took some time off. Worked in private security." "I see," I said. I picked up a pen, pretending to make a note. "And you've always served under the name Frank Miller?" The silence was electric. Peterson and Davies exchanged a confused look. They didn't understand the relevance, but Miller did. Oh, he understood perfectly. The color drained from his face. The confident posture evaporated. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. "What does that have to do with anything?" he stammered, his voice losing its booming confidence. "It's a simple question for the record, officer," I said calmly. "One that's relevant to your credibility as a witness and now as the accuser. Have you, at any point in your law enforcement career, served under a different name?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his thick neck. "No," he lied. But his voice was a weak whisper. The lie was written all over his face. I let the lie hang in the air for a moment, letting him stew in it. I put down the pen and folded my hands, looking at him with all the weight of the bench, of my office, of the 15 years I'd waited for this moment without even knowing it. "That's interesting," I said, letting a sliver of ice enter my tone, "because I have a distinct memory of a young officer with your face working a case in a different city, entirely. An officer named Milkowski. His whole body went rigid. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Peterson was staring at him, his jaw slack. An officer," I continued, my voice low and merciless, "who was the last person to see a confidential informant named Hector Ramirez alive." Ah, the name Hector Ramirez landed in the silent courtroom like a physical blow. Miller, or Milkowski, or whatever he called himself, flinched as if I'd struck him across the face. The blood drained from his features, leaving a pasty, gray mask of pure panic. His eyes, once so full of arrogant defiance, were now wide with the terror of a man watching his own grave being dug. He looked at Peterson, then at Davies, as if searching for an escape route, but they were just as frozen, caught in the sudden, lethal undertow of a past he thought was long buried. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, the words catching in his throat. It was a pathetic denial, devoid of any conviction. "Don't you, officer?" I leaned back in my chair, projecting an aura of calm I was far from feeling. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of adrenaline and long-delayed justice. "Let me refresh your memory. 15 years ago. A different city. You were a rookie, working vice. The case was against a distributor named Marcus Thorne. Your key witness was a 17-year-old kid, Hector Ramirez. He was terrified, but he'd agreed to testify in exchange for having his own charges dropped. He was scheduled to appear before a grand jury on a Thursday morning. He never made it. Every word was a nail in his coffin. I could see the memories flashing behind his eyes, the carefully constructed walls of his new life crumbling to dust. The prosecutor, Peterson, was staring at him now, not with confusion, but with dawning horror. He was connecting the dots. A cop with a changed name, a vanished witness. The implications were monstrous. You filed a report, Officer Milkowski, I continued, hitting the old name hard. You said you dropped him at the Greyhound station. You said he was running, but his sister never believed it. She said Hector would never have left without his mother's locket, a cheap piece of silver he never took off. But you didn't know about the locket, did you? It wasn't in your neat, tidy report. This is insane, Miller gasped, finding a sliver of his voice. You're dredging up some old case you lost. You're trying to smear me because I called you out on your bias. This is witness intimidation from the bench. Is it? I countered, my voice dangerously soft. Or is it establishing a pattern of behavior? A pattern of evidence conveniently disappearing? A pattern of malfunctions? Hector's file went missing from the evidence locker for 3 days, right after he disappeared. Your body camera today just happened to malfunction. You seem to have a real problem with keeping records intact when they might incriminate you, officer. I'm a decorated officer, he roared, a desperate last-ditch attempt at bluster. My record speaks for itself. Your record is a lie, I shot back, my voice finally rising, echoing the authority of my position. Your very name is a lie. You think you can stand in my courtroom, wrapped in the shield of a uniform you have dishonored, and accuse me of bias. You, a man who buried his name to outrun his crimes. You, who I suspected far more than just lose a witness all those years ago. I stood up, the black robe swirling around me. I felt 10 feet tall. All the years of biting my tongue, of navigating the carefully laid tripwires of race and power in the justice system, it all fell away. There was only the truth, raw and ugly, and I was going to drag it into the light. I pointed a finger, not at him, but at the court reporter. Madam Reporter, I want this on the record. I am tabling the motion for recusal. The current proceedings against Mr. Jamal Evans are hereby declared a mistrial due to prosecutorial reliance on the testimony of a compromised and potentially perjurious witness. Peterson's head snapped up. Your Honor, I object. Your objection is noted and overruled, Mr. Peterson. The charges against Mr. Evans are dismissed with prejudice. I slammed the gavel down. Bang. Mr. Evans, you're free to go. Jamal Evans looked at his public defender, his eyes filling with tears of disbelief and relief. Davies clapped him on the shoulder, his own face a mask of stunned awe. Bailiff, I ordered, turning my full attention back to the trembling man in the witness box. Take Officer Frank Miller, also known as Frank Milkowski, into custody. On what charge? Miller shrieked, his face contorting in a mask of rage and fear. For now, perjury. Lying under oath about your identity is an excellent start, I said coolly. But I think we're going to find a lot more once we start digging. Mr. Peterson, you may want to call your supervisor. I suggest you inform him that the court is opening a formal inquiry into the disappearance of Hector Ramirez, and our primary person of interest is currently in custody. Sergeant Peters, a man I'd worked with for years, didn't hesitate. He moved with swift professional purpose, unlocking the gate to the witness box. Miller scrambled backwards, his bravado completely shattered. He was just a cornered rat now. You can't do this, he yelled, his voice cracking. I have rights. I'm a cop. You were a cop, I corrected him, my voice like ice. Right now you're just a suspect. Peters grabbed Miller's arm. The decorated officer, the courtroom bully, tried to wrench it away. A foolish, reflexive act of defiance. Peters was stronger. He twisted Miller's arm behind his back with a practiced grunt, forcing him down towards the table. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs echoed through the vast, empty room. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. As Sergeant Peters began to lead the cuffed, sputtering Miller out of the courtroom, I felt a grim satisfaction. It was done. I had exposed him. But as they reached the door, Miller twisted his head around, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. He wasn't looking at me with fear anymore. He was looking at me with pure hatred. You think this is over? He snarled, his voice a low, vicious promise. You have no idea what you've just done, you bitch. Marcus Thorne doesn't forget. He never forgets. You just signed your own death warrant. The name Marcus Thorne hit me like a physical shockwave, a blast of Arctic air in the stale courtroom. For 15 years that name had been a ghost, a whisper in the back of my mind representing a failure, a case that got away. Now, spit from the mouth of Frank Milkowski, it was a threat, a promise. Sergeant Peters, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, shoved Milkowski forward, trying to get him out the door. But the damage was done. The ghost was back, and it had a name. My blood ran cold. Marcus Thorne wasn't just a distributor. He was a monster who had built an empire on fear and bloodshed. He was untouchable, insulated by layers of lawyers and street soldiers. Hector Ramirez was our one chance, a kid on the inside who had seen too much and had been brave, or foolish, enough to talk. When Hector vanished, Thorne walked. He'd faded from the headlines, but men like that don't just retire. They burrow deeper into the city's shadows, growing stronger, more malignant. And Milkowski, the dirty rookie cop, had apparently been his instrument. Not just a bungling officer who lost a witness, but an accomplice. Maybe even the triggerman. "Get him out of here, Sergeant," I ordered, my voice tight. The satisfaction I'd felt moments before was evaporating, replaced by a chilling dread. Milkowski's parting shot wasn't just the desperate threat of a cornered man. It was an explanation. It was the missing piece of the puzzle. He hadn't just been a dirty cop. He'd been Thorne's cop, and I had just kicked the hornet's nest. As the heavy courtroom doors boomed shut behind them, an unnerving silence descended once more. It was just me, the young Ada Peterson, and the public defender Davies, who was still trying to process his client's miraculous freedom. Jamal Evans was gone, already a ghost himself, hopefully on a bus far away from this mess. Peterson finally broke the silence, his voice shaky. "Your Honor, Judge Hayes, what in God's name just happened?" I sank back into my chair, the weight of the robe suddenly feeling immense. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a tremor in my hands that I hid by gripping the arms of my chair. "What just happened, Mr. Peterson, is that a 15-year-old cold case just walked into my courtroom wearing a police uniform. I looked at him, a kid barely 5 years out of law school, and saw the reflection of my younger self, eager, a little naive, believing the system worked. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Don't talk to your direct supervisor. Go straight to the head of the Major Crimes Division. Tell him Judge Alana Hayes has remanded Frank Milkowski, also known as Frank Miller, on perjury and suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder in the disappearance of Hector Ramirez. Tell him the key conspirator is Marcus Thorne." Peterson's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. "Marcus Thorne? The Marcus Thorne? I thought he was gone." "So did I cut in. Apparently we were wrong. This goes to the top, you understand. No one else. I don't know how deep Thorne's influence goes, or who else might be on his payroll. We have to assume Milkowski isn't the only one." He nodded, a new, steely resolve hardening his young face. He finally understood the stakes. "Yes, Your Honor, I'll go right now." He turned and practically ran from the courtroom. Davies approached the bench, his usual weary demeanor replaced by a look of profound respect. "Judge," he said, his voice quiet, "I've given you a hard time over the years, but what you did today, for that kid, and for that witness all those years ago, thank you." "Just do me a favor, Mr. Davies," I said, managing a weak smile. "Make sure Jamal Evans stays out of trouble. He got a second chance today. Don't let him waste it." He nodded. "He's a good kid. He will. You be careful, Judge." He said it with a gravity that unnerved me. He knew the name Marcus Thorne, too. Everyone in the justice system did. He gave a final nod and left me alone in the vast, empty room. I sat there for a long time, the silence pressing in. The weight of Milkowski's threat settled on me. "You just signed your own death warrant. Was it a bluff? Or had I, in my quest for long-delayed justice, made a fatal error? I thought about my daughter, Maya, away at college, safe and brilliant and so full of life. A fresh wave of fear, cold and sharp, washed over me. This wasn't just about me anymore. My clerk, a wonderfully efficient woman named Maria, poked her head in. "Judge, are you all right? The whole courthouse is buzzing." "I'm fine, Maria," I lied. "Cancel the rest of my docket for the day. Personal reasons." She nodded, her expression full of concern but too professional to ask more. As I walked back to my chambers, the hall seemed different. The familiar faces of bailiffs and lawyers now looked like potential threats. Was that deputy looking at me too long? Did that lawyer I'd never seen before work for Thorne? Paranoia was a poison, and it was already seeping into my veins. Back in the safety of my chambers, I locked the door and leaned against it, my legs weak. I stripped off the heavy robe, the symbol of my power, and suddenly I felt vulnerable, exposed. I was no longer Judge Hayes, the untouchable figure on the bench. I was Alana Hayes, a woman who had just publicly declared war on one of the most dangerous criminals in the city's history. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it. My second born of a sudden, chilling premonition, was to answer. I clicked the screen, my hand trembling slightly. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end for a moment, just the faint sound of static, of distance. Then a voice spoke, a voice that was low and raspy, like gravel grinding against velvet. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 15 years, but one I had heard replayed 1,000 times in depositions and wiretaps. It was a voice that had haunted my nightmares. "Judge Hayes," the voice said, the sound dripping with a cold, almost reptilian calm. "This is Marcus Thorne. I hear you've been asking about an old employee of mine. I think it's time you and I had a little chat. In person." The voice on the phone was a ghost made real, a phantom of failure given flesh and sound. My entire body went rigid. Marcus Thorne. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was reaching out of them, his voice a cold hand gripping my heart. For a split second, pure, primal fear threatened to paralyze me. Then the rage hit. The fury of a prosecutor who'd been cheated, the indignation of a judge whose courtroom had been violated, the terror of a mother whose child could be endangered. It all coalesced into a diamond-hard point of resolve. "I have nothing to say to you, Thorne," I said, my voice colder than I thought possible, "except to advise you to get a very good lawyer. You're going to need one." A low, dry chuckle crackled through the phone. It was the most chilling sound I'd ever heard. "Oh, I have lawyers, Judge. I have the best. But this isn't a legal matter. This is a personnel issue. You've upset the natural order of things. You took something of mine. Frank was a loyal employee, a bit of a hothead, but loyal. You can't just do that. He was a murderer and a perjurer hiding in a police uniform," I shot back, "and you were his master. The natural order you believe in is over." "Is it?" he said, his voice laced with mocking pity. "You judges, you live in a world of paper and rules. You think your gavels and your robes have real power. But out here, in the real world, power is a different currency. It's about loyalty. It's about fear. You've disrupted my business, Judge Hayes, and now I have to disrupt yours." The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. "Disrupt yours." It wasn't just a threat against me. It was a threat against my world, my life, my family. My first call was to my daughter, Maya. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" Her voice was a sunbeam, full of life and the carefree energy of a 19-year-old. "Hi, sweetie," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Listen, I need you to do something for me. No questions asked. Pack a bag. Your Aunt Caroline is booking you a flight to London. You're going to spend a semester abroad, starting tonight." "What? Mom, what are you talking about? The semester just started. I have midterms next month. We'll sort it out with the university. I'll handle it. But you need to go. Now. Please, Maya. Trust me." The desperation in my voice must have broken through, because her tone changed. "Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I can't explain right now, but I promise I will. I just need you to be safe. I love you more than anything in this world, and I need you on a plane tonight." After a tearful, terrifying conversation, she finally agreed. My sister Caroline, a force of nature, had the ticket booked within 10 minutes. Only then did a small measure of my breathing return. She was safe. Now I could fight. My next call was to David Carter, the head of major crimes, the man I'd told Peterson to find. David was an old friend, one of the few people I trusted implicitly. We came up through the DA's office together. "Alana, Peterson just left my office. His story is insane. Is it true? Milkowski?" "It's all true, David, and it gets worse. Thorne just called me. He threatened me." There was a string of curses on the other end of the line. "Where are you? Stay in your chambers. Lock the door. I'm sending a protection detail, and I'm coming over myself." Within the hour, my chambers looked like a command center. David was there, his face grim, along with 2 of his best detectives. They put Milkowski in an interrogation room, but he wasn't talking. He'd lawyered up and was repeating one phrase: "Talk to Marcus Thorne." "He thinks Thorne is going to get him out of this," David said, pacing my office. "He's loyal. Or terrified. Probably both." "Thorne feels untouchable," I said. "He called me because he wanted me to know that. He wants me to be afraid. He thinks he can intimidate me into dropping this, that he can make Milkowski's case fall apart." "Is he right?" David asked, his eyes searching mine. "I thought about Hector Ramirez, the 17-year-old kid who never got to see justice. I thought about Jamal Evans, who almost became another casualty of a broken system. I thought about my daughter, on a plane to another continent because a monster felt he was above the law." "No," I said, my voice ringing with certainty. "He's not. He made a mistake. For 15 years he was a ghost. But by threatening a federal judge, he's made himself a target. He's poked the biggest bear in the woods. I spent the next 3 days in virtual lockdown, working with David and a joint task force of local and federal agents. We tore apart Frank Milkowski's life. We found the money trail, a series of shell corporations that led right back to Thorne's known businesses. Milkowski hadn't just helped Thorne's enforcers snatch Hector. He'd been on the payroll for years, a cancer inside the police department, feeding Thorne information, sabotaging cases, and protecting his assets. My courtroom outburst hadn't just been about Jamal Evans, it was about protecting the entire criminal enterprise. The key came from an unexpected place: the file on Hector Ramirez. The original case file was thin, but my old prosecutor's notes were meticulous. I'd interviewed Hector's sister, Elena, multiple times. She was the one who told me about the silver locket. In my notes, I'd written down a detail I'd long forgotten. Elena had said Hector had a secret. He'd been so proud of it. He'd taken a photo. Proof, he'd called it. My get-out-of-jail-free card. He said he kept it somewhere safe, somewhere no one would ever think to look. We'd searched his room, his car, everywhere. We never found it. Working with the task force, we located Elena Ramirez. She was a teacher now, married with 2 kids. The pain of her brother's disappearance was still raw. We sat in her kitchen, and I asked her about the photo. Her eyes lit up with a flicker of memory. "The locket," she whispered. "He loved our mom so much. He opened it up and replaced her picture. He said Mom would understand. He put his proof in there." The locket was never found, but Milkowski's tidy report had mentioned Hector's personal effects. A wallet, keys, a watch. All logged into evidence and eventually returned to his mother. But the locket wasn't on the list. Milkowski had taken it. He must have known or suspected what was inside. This was the leverage we needed. We brought Milkowski back into the interrogation room. This time, I was there, watching from behind the one-way glass with David. "We know about the locket, Frank," David said, sliding a photo of Hector across the table. "We know what was inside it. A picture of you meeting with Marcus Thorne, exchanging a package. Hector's get-out-of-jail-free card, his life insurance, and you took it." Milkowski's face went white. He'd kept it all these years, a trophy, or his own insurance against Thorne. A search of a safety deposit box under one of his aliases an hour later proved us right. There it was, a cheap silver locket, and inside a tiny, folded-up photograph. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. A young Officer Milkowski handing a thick envelope to Marcus Thorne in a dark alley. It was over. Faced with the photo and the promise of the death penalty for his role in Hector's murder, Milkowski's loyalty shattered. He sang like a canary. He gave us everything: names, dates, drop sites, and the location where he and another of Thorne's men had buried Hector Ramirez's body 15 years ago. The next day, I sat on my bench, the black robe feeling less like a burden and more like armor. The courtroom was packed. Marcus Thorne was brought in, not as a whisper or a ghost, but as a defendant in an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller in person, stripped of his power and mystique. He scanned the room, and his eyes met mine. There was no confidence left, no cold amusement. There was only the stunned, impotent rage of a king who had been toppled from his throne. He had miscalculated. He thought he was untouchable, but he'd picked a fight in the one place I had absolute power. He'd brought his world of shadows and fear into my world of light and law. And in my world, I was the one who made the rules. He thought he was exposing my bias. Instead, he exposed himself. And in doing so, he gave me the chance to finally deliver the justice Hector Ramirez and so many others had been denied for far too long.